Can you hear that, Hasita? My brand new leather-bound 2023 planner is here.
Okay, firstly, where's mine? And secondly, where's mine? What are you doing with your own planner? So unfair.
No, it's so personal, Hasita. It's like, it's not an easy decision. There's so much of research that goes behind choosing the planner for the next year. And then the next year you get to do the research all over again. So that's fun too. But it brings me great joy to say, okay, this year is done and dusted. And then I get a clean slate and fresh new pages, and I can start putting my thoughts together and planning for the next year.
So now that the planner is here, what's for 2023, Suba?
I think 2022 was a good year that helped me find focus. It helped me drop distractions. It helped me say, okay, this is what I want to be doing, and these are the kind of assignments I want to take up. And now that I know that, and I now that I have a much better sense of my audience, so to speak, let me figure out how to reach them in the most optimal way.
Yeah. I think that's the important distinction to make, right? To know that yes, I have a good product or have a good service, and now I'm really ready for more people to find out about it and benefit from it. And yes, of course, eventually there is a financial component to it. And it's interesting that we are kind of having this conversation in the context of a year like 2023, because apparently investors' top concern now is not inflation, but it's recession. And that should kind of tell us something, at least about the general mood of the world, right? Like a recession is not so much that will 100% come to pass in a certain way, but the fact that it exists on the horizon, and in some ways you're hedging a bet on growing your business in that economic context.
Yeah. No, it's true. I get it. And recession is gloomy days for sure. Maybe in a way it makes me think that all the more reason why I need to plan, right? All the more reason because resources are always limited, right?
Hmm.
Let's admit that. And maybe in the coming year, opportunities will also be limited. So I need to really grab what comes my way, for which I need to attract the right opportunities.
Absolutely. I think you're spot on. In the context of marketing or in general, any kind of function that you're running that is business critical, it's not so much the idea that you pause it or you kind of, cut back severely on it. On the other hand, it's also not that you start trying new things and, you start experimenting. Somewhere you have to find that balance between doing those two in a way that gives you some outcomes over a period of time. And that's the tricky bit, right? Because what is recession? Recession is fear, essentially, which means that I may reduce my purchases from places and people and businesses and services that I don't fully know or I don't have a reasonable opinion to make a decision on. Right. So, this is exactly the time when I think the potential of all the good work that you've done in the past will come to fruition. And we will see more and more of that consolidation happening, I think, through this year, wherein businesses that have invested the time, the money, the energy into being present in a consistent manner over a period of time, definitely they'll see some significant benefit.
Sure, sure. No, I'd love to obviously pick your brain on what putting together that marketing plan should really look like. Because, every time I think about it, I sound all gung-ho and ready and, empty planner pages. It's still quite a bit of a blank screen in front of me. Like, where do I start?
Right. In fact, I'll just kind of, riff off on what you just said. And somebody once said that a writer's block is not so much that I'm not able to write, it's that I don't have enough information to begin writing with. Right. And I think a lot of planning also can sometimes feel like that you have all the tools, you have the good intent. So why is it not, why is the plan not materializing right then and there? So let's, dive deep into that and really talk about, if I had these 12 months and in the context of whatever's happening around the world, and I'm a business that's, kind of trying to succeed in that environment, what could I do, right? Welcome to the Damn Good Marketing Podcast. New year, New as I'd like to believe. And this time we are discussing what you should put or you shouldn't put into your marketing plan for 2023. I think that serves as a reasonably sufficient introduction. So let's just dive into the meat of the topic, shall we?
Let's. And I think we've got quite a bit to cover and quite a bit on my mind for sure. Um, and to start with, just this notion, okay, I'm going to put together a marketing calendar. And hence, the first thing that comes to mind is content.
Right.
And I think, content today has started to take so many shapes and forms. It used to be a few years ago when I started out that when you said content, the only thing that you really meant was a blog post.
True. And let's kind of call back to the four pillars of digital marketing as we see it, right? There's content, there's brand, there's analytics, and there's advertising, right? And by advertising, I mean paid push and whatever paid marketing that you run. And I don't think that they are all independent of each other, right? So it's not only a content plan, it's not only a brand plan. It's that all of these things are going to come together, and maybe you're placing more emphasis on content, or maybe you're placing more emphasis on what is known as performance marketing at this point in time. And in your context, especially, Subha, you have done a lot of content for many, many years. I think in some ways you could be called the first mover in the content marketing space. And sure, I mean, we did it with whatever limited knowledge and resources we had over a period of time. But the fact is that until 2022 rolled around, monthly you were able to put out 3 4 blogs, you were able to put out newsletters, you had some kind of social media distribution going, and that kind of broke in 2022 for a variety of reasons, right? So are you really starting from scratch? I don't think so. So in that sense, I think any business, right, I feel like whether you've put it out there as a blog post or whether you've just kept it in internal like a pitch document or a case study, we are all sitting on piles and piles of content. I think this is something that it's very important we realize at this point in time, because sometimes starting from scratch can feel like a lot.
Very true. And, I'm thinking out loud as you said, or as you pointed out, the four pillars: content, brand, advertisement. And I never really considered analytics as a. I have so much content out there. Shouldn't one of the first things that be to see what worked?
Right. So, and you just kind of go ahead and repurpose some of it and say that, hey, historically, over the last, maybe not the last 12 months, but if I've published a blog post some 5 6 years ago, how can I make it more contextual? Right. So obviously content from 5 6 years ago may no longer be relevant, but if it's a good topic, say it talks about delegation, it talks about time management, it maybe talks about your performance and how to evaluate that over a period of time, then you want to be able to repurpose that for the modern context. What does time management mean in a world where we are constantly connected with each other, right? Or what does delegation mean in the context of gig work, for example? So I think it's more of creating relevance in your content than saying, hey, now I have to write an entire blog post from scratch, right? So maybe that mindset shift will kind of sometimes help us, because we are not taking on another full-time job. We're just kind of communicating what is already in our hands.
Oh, yeah, yeah. No, I think that's that's so true that many times we shy away from it, or we start to sometimes even just resent it a bit because it feels like, hey, you've given me one more full-time job and I've already got three.
Yeah.
Like, how am I going to do this also?
Exactly. In fact, I'll go one step further and say this is also the reason why we outsource it most of the time. We are not really outsourcing for expertise. We are outsourcing because we don't have the time. And the quality of that work, I think we all can kind of, see where that would go, isn't it?
Yeah. No, and outsourcing for you know sometimes we're just too close to it, right? Like for me to be able to see why a topic didn't work, or why a certain approach to putting something out there didn't work, it gets difficult after a period of time, especially after putting in a lot of energy into it, or really maybe sometimes it comes from a very personal space and you story and then it's not received as much as you hoped. You do need other voices to give you that objective thought process that, hey, this is who you are, and this is what you're trying to put out there, and can we plan it this way or that way, and what are the different ways in which we can put it out there.
Exactly. I think what you've essentially spoken about, Subha, is the sum total of a brief document, right? And this is exactly why, especially creative professionals, need a brief to work with. I have myself seen the difference between, work that is produced when there is enough context and work that's produced without said context, right? In fact, we shall add a link to a brief template perhaps in the show notes, because it's a very important starting point for you to get thinking. It's not just about, hey, have I done? And I think we've definitely moved away from that world of saying, hey, have I done 4 blogs this month? The search algorithm is not behaving like that anymore. And I think we all know that people are not behaving like that anymore. So why should we then be governed by the same old thinking around SEO, right?
No, very true. I think many times you're kind of expecting the person or the agency or the freelancer to be a bit of a mind reader,
Yeah, yeah.
because you can see it and you can feel it, and you're wondering, despite spending 2 hours on a Zoom call with you, why don't you get it? But it comes down to a very good brief document, or in whichever way you want to give it, but the message has to get across, and it forces you to think too.
Translate, exactly. So true, right? Because otherwise, how will you find that alignment,
Hmm.
right? And honestly, you as a coach in the business, Subha, will have a lot more context than any writer who's worked with you for any quantum of time, right? Because we simply do not have visibility into the same conversations that you're having. And in that sense, the brief is meant to solve for that problem, right? To say that, hey, this is how my customers usually talk to each other, right? This is the tone they use. These are the examples they talk about. These are the newsletters they discuss. These are the content pieces that they follow. Now, I, or anybody for that matter, as an external creative professional, is only going to be able to look into it only that much, right? So, my reference point is my years and years and years of secondary knowledge gained via Google and whatever else I could find. So, that's where I think it's a way of meeting in the middle, really. That's what a brief document can really help you do. So, and it's not just blogs, tomorrow you produce any kind of interactive content. Also, I think it's important that we stop looking at content as only the written content, right? Yes, writing is definitely an easy way to communicate, but it's not the only way. So, say tomorrow somebody, for example, a podcast could be a part of somebody's marketing plan, right? So, you cannot outsource a podcast. I think we both can kind of blanket agree that that's just not possible.
No, I think, yeah, but I think what it has done for us is that it has helped us expand our universe of the content that we're producing, right?
Right.
So it helps you kind of give your own thoughts a new perspective. It's very different, one, when you're putting it into words versus when you're saying it out loud. And we, both of us are feeling the pressure to also now think about video as a content platform, and rightly so, because they're and I think, Sasita, somewhere it comes down to also being topical, relevant, and in the medium that your audience enjoys it, right?
Right. And speaking of media, I think, Subha, honestly, I know it's difficult to accept even for the two of us, but the fact is that video is probably here to stay, right? I'm just kind of comparing in terms of, the reels that I enjoy sometimes and the kind of, content that I'm just sometimes mindlessly consuming. Net, it's all coming down to video. Even on YouTube, I'm like a passionate viewer of the YouTube shorts. So why then do I believe that anybody else will behave differently, right? And I think we are also thinking very deeply about videos. So I mean, if somebody is already comfortable doing it, I think they should just go for it and put good content out there. That baseline will always stay. But at the same time, how do you, like, you have a limited budget, right? And the harder something is to produce, the costlier it's going to be, right? So a written piece may still be relatively cheaper than a podcast episode, may still be relatively cheaper than a video based piece of content, right? So a is to really not make it a skill that is specific to one person or one individual, right? So don't just kind of, say that, hey, this is my agency's job and therefore I will just let them run with it. Also think about what kinds of, videos, firstly, you can produce at this point in time. And secondly, if you're going to be producing it, do you want it to be fun? Do you want it to be topical? Do you want it to be short format, long format? So these are all things that can be decided internally based on your budgets, right? And at the same time, also not to forget the fact that all these things have to serve a purpose, right? So it's, I mean, sure, we all get very excited. I think definitely in the launching of season one, there was a certain excitement born of ignorance, maybe, which comes season two, it's kind of consolidated, right? Like we know exactly what it takes to produce an episode, right? So in that context, I would also kind of encourage people and, all of us for that matter, to think about where in the customer journey is this whole thing falling, right? Because let's be honest, none of us want to speak into a void, no? I mean, tomorrow if nobody listened to this, then my motivation to produce it would be far lesser than what it is today. So in that context, say for example, a podcast could be a great awareness channel, right? So maybe 20 people have discovered you and some of them may even have turned into business opportunities, so you have early proof of concept. I would probably not then invest too much money and effort into thinking, hey, how do I make this 200, 300, 400, at least in the next year? Because I know it's not looking good. The year is looking a little bleak. Why can I not take the 20 that are already listening to me and think about what value can I exchange with them in exchange for money, which is what business is, right? So it could be that maybe not everybody is ready for my services as they are at this point in time, but I'm sure some more people would be ready for some other service which I'm already in a position to offer. I think that's really the way to think about marketing. It's not really separate from, the business function itself. It's marketing product. I think they're constantly kind of, doing that dance with each other.
Yeah, I get it. It's kind of falling into place. And so I guess my next question would be that, okay, now I've, thought about brand, and or rather there is awareness of the brand that I want to put out there and who the audience is. And then I'm looking at, okay, I have existing content I want to repurpose, there's new stuff I want to say, which are the channels, medium, etc., etc. Then what, like what do I do? Because what, which platform do I choose, and what is there really, like how detailed does that calendar get?
Yeah, I mean, see, a calendar again has to be a roadmap for you, so it has to get as detailed as it would make you comfortable getting into action mode, right? So some of us may want that high level general sense of, okay, this is what we are doing for the next 3 months or 4 months. Some of us may need a little more cohesion in terms of saying, hey, on Wednesday I'm doing this, on Thursday I'm doing this. So in that sense, I think it's to each their own in many ways. And the only thing that you should think about while building a calendar is, will this support me or will this overwhelm me really? And tactically speaking, in terms of platforms, I think we are all very cognizant of the fact that every platform is crowded, right? Especially platforms like Facebook and Instagram. I think already we are seeing how difficult it is to break through purely from an organic standpoint. And the ads are not really getting cheaper by the day. The more crowded your market is, I think you end up spending more and more purely on advertising. So, my point is this, right? If you know that your customer is here, say my customer spends 2 hours on Instagram every day. It's a hypothesis that you may have based on your own behaviors and what you've observed. Might as well put that money into ads and find out, is all I would say, right? So there's no way to really get away from this and say, no, I know my customers here. I'm also here, but I'm not going to push for anything beyond organic, is a little, I think it's a dream scenario. It's not going to happen. Right. At the same time, you can also say that, hey, my customer has nothing to do with Instagram. Even remotely net, they are not, spending a minute thinking about business when they are on Instagram. So then I want to maybe invest on LinkedIn. Right. And LinkedIn, as we all know, is a very different platform. I mean, sure, you can advertise, and a lot of people do advertise. It's highly recommended. But that's not where you begin, right? So, as an awareness channel, purely from an organic standpoint, if there's one platform that's still giving you the space to say, hey, you put good content out there and more people will see it, I think today that's still LinkedIn, right? So, which is why we see, all kinds of people, all kinds of businesses are moving to that platform as well.
Yeah, I think I've definitely made stronger inroads into honestly my own comfort on LinkedIn more than anything, right? To be and to understand it a little better as to and I think coming back to my earlier question as to how detailed the content plan has to be, I think it has to be flexible enough to allow you to say, okay, this worked, this didn't. I'll add more of this. I'll take away some of this, right? And that's where I do also, if I have outsourced to an agency, I would appreciate their thinking on it. Their thought processing. Hey, this seemed to have worked for you. Do more, do less, etc.
Exactly, right. And that's where I think it's a true partnership. And I would go one step further and say that, inflexibility really makes itself most apparent in an agency client relationship, right? Because the fact is that there are two very different physical offices, and, you're working in your own kind of echo chambers at some point. So, which is where I think, to be honest, is it a weekly call? Is it a monthly report? Is it something else? I think that's a rhythm that each agency and client have to find with each other, because we do service clients who expect weekly calls, and we also have clients who are happy with the monthly report and they're taking decisions based on that, right? So, but do ask is the whole, I think, takeaway from here, and that's true for both us as agencies and the client as well, to say that, hey, can you give me some visibility into what's working, because I'm planning for the next quarter, right? If you tell me that Instagram needs an X budget, then that budget is going to come at the expense of something else. So you tell me what I can sacrifice so that I can put that budget into, whatever it is that you're recommending. And this is where I think some of us also kind of shy away from being too sure of giving those recommendations, because on the client side, it's also important to understand that it's all eventually net always in flux, right? So you plan, you do it with the best of intent, it works. 90% of the time it works, but there are no guarantees.
Hmm. No, I think the no guarantee, especially when you outsource and you pay for something, you have to remind yourself because otherwise it's honestly unfair, right? The
Yeah,
way
yeah.
the yesterday I saw some brand. I think out of sheer frustration, they put out a reel saying that we don't know what to do anymore, right?
Yeah, yeah.
We're singing
We've
and
done the song
dancing
and
because
dance.
yeah, like literally it was a brand manager. It's a cute
Yeah,
little video. I
yeah.
think Sleepy Owl. I mean, I get it. It's part of a gimmick, but the social media manager saying, "Listen, I'm singing and dancing because finally, apparently, that's all that
That's
works."
what works, right? And I think we all resonate so much with it. Sleepy Owl is a good brand to kind of, draw from and follow on Instagram, because they do seem to be doing some very cool stuff for sure.
Yeah, yeah. So this is helping a lot, and I think um, the other thing is, what a lot of people are talking about, that the content piece itself has become a little easier, right now, Hasita? I mean, you don't have to write it yourself.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, you have AI tools to do the job for you. But my one of my favorite things to say, and I said it myself, so it's a self quote in that sense, is that an AI chatbot or a copywriter is essentially writing in the same tonality and style as a very generic writer that you're paying very badly. So I said it very nicely for in the interest of the podcast, but yeah, something on those lines, right? Like AI is turning out generic stuff because we have turned out generic stuff for a very long time. And perhaps my suspicion is that the model has been trained on all the generic stuff that we've been putting out there. So watch your backs. I think the days of generic content are really, really coming to an end for sure.
Yeah. No, that was genuinely my experience last night as I was fooling around on Chat GPT, where I put in a kind of a title and it had the name of my podcast, and the Chat GPT said, "Hey, listen, I can't search the internet. I don't know what happened after 2021." Uh, right? And I'm thinking that so much of what the writing that I need for my business, it has to be topical, it has to be about what's happening today, and it has to have references to what's happening today in the business and workplace. So how can an AI one, my voice, my tone, there's a certain style that has now become very, it's constant, it's that's how I'm going to sound, and that's how I'm going to write and put my thoughts out there. The AI won't capture that, because like you said, it has to take a general tone. And if it's telling me that I'm not searching the internet, then it can't give me that stupid thing Musk did today reference, or something that happened at Bharat Pay or whatever, right? Like that stuff just won't be there.
True, because a model is going to be trained in cycles, right? And there lies your answer to, is SEO dead? I think we can all answer. It's not going to be a sudden death, right? At least that much is something that we can be sure of. So honestly, if your plan so far and your results so far have come from being dependent on SEO, then now is not the time to sacrifice that just because an AI tool has entered the market, right? It's still going to be gradual change. It's going to happen over a period of time. And what you said about voice is so true. I think more and more we are going to be seeking those authentic voices, right? We want to hear what Subha thinks about, layoffs, for example, right? We don't want to see 5 tips on how to avoid a layoff. I think that's the point. So, say, for example, if your keyword, again, kind of going back to a more generic topic, is time management tips, right? You can't do 10 proven ways to manage your time. I think those days are finally behind us, and thank God for it. Now you have to get a little more intentional, right? So you have to get a little more creative in terms of saying the 7 people in the world who've managed their time the best, and what you can learn from them. That's still, I would say, slightly more generic, right? Say, for example, how do you run theme parks and produce movies at the same time? Bob Iger's time management techniques, right? So what it's doing is it's pushing you to think also and research and really get to know the subject that you're kind of trying to talk about. And yes, can writers do this? Can you outsource this process? 100% you can, assuming again that you've briefed them correctly, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I think it also knowing that this is your audience now, right? Like I'm sure there is an audience for 7 time management hacks. Not to say that there isn't, but is that your audience now? Because you have kind of grown that group to a space where, like you said, they need something more researched, more nuanced, more in depth.
Yeah. And not just that, right? It's also, say I put out the 7 or 10 or how many ever proven time management techniques. I am competing against everyone else who's writing about the same thing. And that's my real loss, right? Because suddenly I am just another voice in an extremely crowded market versus somebody being able to think. And that's the whole trust that, periods of, recession and any kind of, business outlook that's not looking too great. People come back to things they trust. People come back to brands they trust because it doesn't place a cognitive load on them to decide, right? Because in my mind, I'm already deciding to like this brand. So that's the real focus now. It's not so much about, hey, can I out compete somebody by writing 20 tips, right? It's more about, can I become that trustworthy voice in my industry? And I know that it's going to take time. Today it'll be 10 people, tomorrow it'll be 20 people. It's definitely something, that a lot of our tools are not built for visibility into brand building, so to speak, right? So I'll have to find alternative means, get creative about it. But I would see that as a more sustainable way of setting yourself up than to just do something to meet, or rather, I would say, in a dog eat dog world, you don't compete like that, right?
No, tons to think about. Tons for page one of my new planner for sure. I'm quite excited about that.
Yeah.
So looking forward to working with you on getting my marketing calendar looking quite snazzy for the next year.
Thank you. I always appreciate it and I love some snazziness.
And I'll send you a planner.
Thank you.
Now it's time for the much awaited topic, Al.
Subha, now that 2022 has come and gone, some semblance of a normalish year, if we could call it that, which brand do you think took the biggest beating?
Ooh, and I think you know where I'm headed. because this big family has really been in my headspace more than even they would like to be.
Yeah. They definitely don't like to be, is the message that we are taking away in any case.
Yeah. No, I think in terms of years, they've had quite a tough one, with the matriarch passing, and with batons being passed, and with people actually leaving the family. Um, who did leave their title. I'm still a little I'm figuring that out. Cheesed, but if you can't figure it out, then I'm really, my mind is on the royal family.
True. And I think, Subha, you and I have had the same Christmas binge because we are fresh off of Harry and Meghan and their story. And I mean, fair point. Like, it's completely okay for them to tell their story however they see it. But it's quite interesting, right? Because it is a brand, whether we recognize it that way or not. And it's a brand that is very emotionally significant to a certain segment of, population in the world. And it is a brand that has changed so much in the last maybe couple of years, coming really to a pivotal moment in 2022 with the passing of a lady who stood for the legacy. So now kind of comes the question of, if the person who was representing all that legacy doesn't exist anymore, and we are kind of, told that Prince Charles has always, or King Charles now, has always been somebody who's advocated for modernizing the royal family and who's kind of been on the forefront of all of that, are they relevant today? And if so, how?
It's going to be a tough. I mean, see, for King Charles, definitely extremely tough act to follow, right? All said
Yeah.
and done, like the the life that she has led in service, there's just no way you can overlook that, or and all said and done, the image or the persona that exists today of King Charles or brand King Charles is not so great, right? For many reasons. And I mean, as a coach, I mean, I get it. Like, I mean, there are a lot of reasons why it's not his fault, or we watched The Crown enough to know that his childhood wasn't easy either, etc. But all said and done, he is representing the brand today, and has got a pretty heavy load on his shoulders. And then you have the youngsters who are pulling in very different directions.
What was with the Will and Kate Christmas card, right? I mean, they were casual. It was quite nice, and that's where I think it's interesting to notice that a lot of these brands, so to speak, have to cater not so much to you and me, right? I think we are fairly committed to the idea of watching another 5 seasons of The Crown if it gets made, and God knows we'll tune into the weddings of all of their children as well. Uh, all of that will continue to pan out. But they are bringing up some interesting conversations around race, around identity, around who we are in this world, right? And whether there is such a thing as too much public scrutiny, right? And these conversations are relevant to whom, if you think about it? It's not so much us, right? Because we've formed our opinions and we are more silent spectators at this point. It's more our children who have to continue to believe in the British royal family, right? Because Prince William will one day become King William, and their children will grow up, and there'll be a whole succession that happens over there. And it has to continue to stand the test of time. And the one thing that Queen Elizabeth was able to do was to keep it relevant for 80 years, right? It was one person, it was easy to look up to her. And now they all have to kind of say, hey, now who am I going to be to these youngsters, to these people who are going to be adults tomorrow, right? And that's where really a brand kind of stands to be relevant. And this is also something that I say to businesses, big and small, that you don't become big by catering to the audience of today alone, right? You become really significant by catering to the audience of tomorrow. And are you really thinking about that? Is your tone of voice, is your, even your thought process, frankly, catering to those people?
And when you said that, the audience of tomorrow, I think maybe that's why we don't get it, and that's why some of these things are doing so well, like the Korean dramas, or certain influencers and certain YouTube channels. We don't easily admit that it's not for us, and so targeting a very different audience, the audience of tomorrow, and making significant inroads.
That's true. And especially if you're a consumer brand, you'll see it more suddenly, you'll see it more faster, right? Because you have to sell, and the only way to know whether you're impacting somebody is by making that sale. But I think even B2B companies, sometimes we forget that the employees that are being hired by my client company are very young people who have their own preferences, who are living a very different life from what maybe I lived all those years ago. And that's why you want to yes, by all means, if there is a timeless component to your brand, latch onto it, do not let it go. But at the same time, also stay flexible enough, because I myself, right, like today we are advocating for founder brands, yes, but also leader brands. We're saying if you're a, CXO, if you're a senior manager, build your personal brand on LinkedIn and start as soon as possible. But also remember to stay flexible, because you never know how the world is going to change. You may go to a different company tomorrow. You may end up hiring and working with people who are very different from your generational, relevance tomorrow. So whatever you build, I think also to maintain that flexibility. My granddad used to say that the tree that survives a storm is one that is flexible enough to bend. Right. And I think that's true for brands as well. Yeah. So if you're going to stand the test of time in tough, markets, then I think having that little leeway to be able to move your branches around a little bit, I would say, is very important.
No, very true. I think your point taken on leaders, because the folks that you're going to hire, the employee of tomorrow, so to speak, they have so many companies and so many brands to choose from, and it's going to be a choice at some point between something that they've heard of, know of, and they identify with that brand, versus you may be the greatest leader of our times, but if no one has heard of you, then that young new hire is going to make a different choice.
So true. Exactly.
Yes, from royal family to our own families and jobs in the future. I think that's a good wrap.
For sure. And we wish you all a very, very happy 2023. We hope this turns into an amazing year for all of your marketing adventures. If you've already been doing something, may it all come to fruition right now, and may it show you proof in more ways than one. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode, and we look forward to producing more and more in this new year.
Bye.